Hi, my name is Benny Johnson. As some of you know, I've been struggling with addiction. However, I decided to change my life and went into recovery. I've started this podcast 90 Days Clean, and I want to take you along in my journey. What does lie ahead of me? Let me be frank, I do not know. Will I ever drink again? I do not know. This is how Stairway to Redemption was born. It is my search for answer in a real-time process of what is going to work for me. It is then my aspiration to help you figure out what's going to work for you. It is our journey together. This week, I'm sharing an episode from a podcast I was a guest on. Afros and is a community of independent podcasters dedicated to curating accessible, inclusive events and space for and by Black podcast creative and audio professionals. Its founder, Talib Jasir, had the great initiative to feature a content creator each day of the month for the month of February for Black History Month. I was one of the lucky few to be selected for the series. I hope you enjoyed this episode and please visit Talib's YouTube channel. And I will come back next week for you guys with a fresh set of episodes from Stairway to Redemption. Please enjoy.
Welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, the first two-day conference for and by Black independent podcast creatives and audio professionals. I'm excited to spotlight 28 outstanding indie podcast creatives who answer the call to be a part of this series. Today, my guest is Benny Johnson. Welcome and thank you for being here. How are you?
Thank you, Talib, for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. We'll definitely get into the podcast, but if you could tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so hi there, the audience. It's Benny Johnson. I'm originally from Senegal, Western Africa. I was born there. I migrated to the US in 2008 to start college at the University of Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh for 6 years, then moved to New York, lived in Long Island and worked in the city for 5 years, then went to Philly and came back to New York. So I've been in the East Coast my whole life. Passion, I'm a software engineer, worked for a media company for 7 years, dancing, music, DJing, sports, classic. And I started a podcast called Stairway to Redemption, but I'm going to let you, Talib, to ask for more details. I guess that's the spiel right now.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. So definitely jump right into the podcast. When did you start it? Why?
So I started Stairway to Redemption October 14th of 2022. A little bit about myself. I'm in recovery. I've been sober now for a little bit over 6 months. When I was inpatient during the summer, I was in a facility in patient rehab in West Hampton. And while I was getting treatment, I was already thinking of the way that I could contribute to peers, basically what we call doing service in the community. And my fault when I was not, what I would like to say is what I noticed was missing among the recovery community was space, like safe spaces to watch sports, for example, right? Or hang out, especially watch sports. When you're in recovery or when you're in life general, if you notice, you can only watch sports either at your place or at a bar. And in places where they sell alcohol, like you cannot watch a game at a cafe. Like it's really rare that people put their TVs on the channel sport at cafes or restaurants or, those places that don't necessarily serve alcohol. It's always been associated with alcohol. So when I was inpatient, I had that mind that how can I create a community where we can help each other watch sports in a safe space that's alcohol free. But when I got out of rehab and started working on my recovery, I started listening to a bunch of podcasts about recovery and still had that idea of like safe space and stuff in my back of my mind, but I'm not quite equipped at the moment to realize that goal. So I was listening to podcasts to people who have a little bit more time than I do in sharing their experience in recovery. And what I noticed is like among that community, too many people were way advanced in their recovery. They had like few years, several years, usually 3, 4 years. There were not that many that were fresh out of rehab. What was important for me was that there were some questions that plague a lot of people when they are fresh out of recovery, like me. For example, you clean for a while, 3 months clean at the time I was. You're plagued by feelings of guilt, of shame sometimes. You want to do right things. You finally feel clear. You want to regain everything that you lost. You're impatient. And at the same time, you have all those resources, those people who are like praising their way of recovery, who are pulling to you. Like, for example, you have Alcoholic Anonymous, who are like, oh, follow us. We're going to take you to the promised land. You have people from other different way of recovery. You have the people from church tell you like, yeah, the way is in the Bible. You have the people from the outpatient program, from the facility. You have the surest way. And put myself through the gauntlet of going to both outpatient and to AA and to several programs at the same time. And I thought that I could share my experience and my feelings about those different avenues to recovery. And having my fresh opinion about it in a real-time process will avoid the pitfall of trying to remember the way I felt in that time because it's fresh. And I noticed that people who have those already podcasts I admire a lot, they recall feelings that they had 2, 3 years beforehand. And I don't know about you, but my memory tends to betray me. There's a feeling that you can remember vividly, but there are like always some details that you forget. And I noticed that personally because I like to journal. I journal every day. When I go back to some of my previous entries, I always amaze myself like, oh, okay. Oh, I forgot that I felt that way. And that's something that I could only remember by reading back previous entries.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as you were talking, it sounded like you were saying that your podcast is somewhat of an audio journal of your lived experiences and your perspective in real time. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. It's a bit of audio journal. The audio journal comes in certain episode when I do my solo episode, which I do every 5 episodes. There's a solo one to do an audio journal. The rest is to share other people's experience and also others' solution to recovery or path to recovery. Yeah.
You're fairly new at podcasting. What would you say, was it the podcast that you listened to that helped you to decide what type of format and the length and what type of podcast you wanted to create? Or did that come from some other place?
There are different sources of inspiration. When I come to podcast, a sober guys podcast, I inspire myself to a bunch of like recovery podcast. The Sober Girls Guide is a good one. The Sobriety Uncensored is a good one. The Sober Guy podcast is a good one. But when it comes to interviewing format and asking questions, I inspire myself a lot from The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah's way of asking questions is very pertinent. He feels that besides not asking yes or no questions, he tried to share his view on an issue, right? And ask the other person opinion, like what's your perspective on it by detailing.
Okay.
I decided most of those podcasts were like about 40 minutes to an hour long, so I stick with that format.
Okay. What would you say as you start your podcast was one of the biggest goals that you wanted to accomplish because of it?
The biggest goal I wanted at first was to give the floor or the mic to diverse sources of opinion. I just didn't want to be like the mouthpiece for Alcoholic Anonymous. I didn't want to be the mouthpiece for the recovery institution, like financial rehab facilities. I wanted to be as diverse as possible so people could make the synthesis of the information and also be as objective as possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I love your approach to podcasting in a way that there are a lot of podcasters who don't listen to podcasts at all, and which is interesting, but it's true. And it's a lot of people that are like that. And so it's always nice to hear someone who podcasts, but also loves to listen to podcasts as well and learns from it. Everybody's out here creating. It's like almost, what can I provide that's different? How can my voice and my experience lend something fresh to this genre? And it's really cool hearing from you and understanding what inspired you, even going outside of podcasting, to watch one of the best that's done it, right? Trevor Noah, to where he is, and then use that as your launch pad to the way in which you know yourself to be able to operate as well and engage with people. So I really think that's super dope, your process.
Thank you, Talib.
Yeah, man, of course. One of the questions that we asked in the submission form was, since I started podcasting, my life has changed in the following ways. And how would you say your life has changed or expanded since you started Stairway to Redemption?
Yeah, so very good question. Something that I didn't see coming was how cathartic that process will be for me. My goal at the beginning, like I said, was to share information and as much information as possible. But I noticed that by talking and listening and doing my research and talking to others, how much it helped me too. No later than yesterday, where I recorded from the next episode, I recorded someone who is from Germany that I met at the AA convention here in New York. And I was amazed how much in common we had. And when she was sharing her story, and I'm a person who is very careful to the power of referring to others or relating to others, especially when you're in addiction. For me, I believe that relating, we all are from like different experience, different background. For example, I'm an immigrant from a third world country in a place where like I might be the only immigrant. And the way I relate, I don't necessarily have the same experience that most other people who fell into addiction. So the relating part, I don't focus on. I don't need to relate in order to connect. But that person, when they shared their story, there were so many similar points that I was like, we grew up in different backgrounds, but I can still see the foundation, what led her to go and fell into addiction are the same. And that remind me of like a saying that somebody told me when I was inpatient. It was like, it doesn't matter if you broke your arm falling down your back or falling down the side of the mountain, the pain is the same. Oh, wow. That was one of those instances where I wasn't expecting to gain so much out of doing this podcast. I was more optic of giving out information,
Yeah, that's a great point, Benny. As we talk to people that we've never met, right, it always expands our worldview and our understanding of not only other people. It gives you a lot more compassion when you're able to understand that there isn't any single story and everyone has a story, right, that's unique to them. So I love that. I love that you've been able to experience that inside of podcasting, because it's real. It's definitely real. And I think why a lot of people choose the interview format is that opportunity to speak to people that they may not have ever gotten an opportunity to, if not for their podcasts.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you. I tried the platform like Podmatch, and I got in touch. There are 2 or 3 people from my podcast I interviewed that I met through Podmatch, and I had great conversation with them. But outside of the podcast world, I don't think I will have ran into them.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. So you talked about these opportunities that you've had, the fact that it's been cathartic for you. Would you consider that to be the biggest win so far in your podcast, or do you have another one that sticks out to you?
I get the recognition from my peers who are also in recovery that like it helps them a lot. I guess that's something to be mentioned, but I don't, without sounding any pretentious or cocky or presumptuous, that's something that I work to be expected if people like your message. And I'm happy for the accolades. Yeah. But the big one was definitely, I didn't anticipate how good it would do to me to have a podcast, how beneficial for me it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially a part of your journey, right? This, in and of itself, the podcast, everyone you interact with becomes a part of your lived experience, supports how you grow and move forward. Everything is shaping. And so it really is important not only to find our own voices, and I would love for you to talk about that a bit. Do you find that you discovered your voice inside of podcasting, or did you already know who you were, where you're coming from and beliefs and all that sort of thing? Or have you found your voice? If not all of it, did you find a piece of yourself inside of the podcasting?
The podcast definitely became an outlet to express myself. I always wanted to be a helper, a facilitator for other people, because one of my defect of character, like we said in the community, is that I suffer from like survivor guilt. I know so many of friends who didn't make it, didn't get a chance to immigrate in the US, didn't get a chance to have a green card. Some people are not longer with us. And sometimes, though, I know I work hard to get who I am, but I got also very lucky. And being a man of science and pragmatic and logical to a fault, I hate luck because luck is not logical. And sometimes what also led me to fall into addiction is that survivor guilt feeling that like I cannot explain 100% why I'm here and others are not, who are like kinder or smarter or maybe more deserving than me, in my opinion. So my way to give back is to help as many others to go where they want, to give them a push so they can get where they would like to be and they didn't get the luck, and to eliminate that luck factor by me being around and helping. And I'm doing it through the podcast right now. Before doing the podcast, my vision was like to have some kind of NGO or nonprofit to help underprivileged people. I always thought I would do this through the means of an NGO, not through the means of a podcast. But maybe I will do both later on. I don't know.
Yeah, anything is possible. You've already got off the sidelines, right? And put yourself in the game. Things possible from here, man.
Yeah.
That's for sure. All right. You've already mentioned the podcast that you listen to. Are there any other podcasts outside of Recovery Podcast that you want to shout out?
Oh, yeah. The sneaker podcast from Complex Magazine with Brandon Dern and Cholo Puma, those guys, and Mal Welty, they're funny as hell. Like,
right.
Yeah, and I like sneakers, I like shoes.
Thank you for sharing that. And so you mentioned wanting to diversify the things that you are able to do as you move forward with your podcast and any other initiatives. Is there anything that you are considering for your podcast in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, definitely growing the audience. I'm doing like very like organically. I don't promote much. I'm using word to mouth and social media. Would like definitely to share it more. I mean, I remember when we met at Podfest, I didn't record an episode yet, so I have not much to share, but the idea of what I wanted to do. I don't worry much about monetization of this thing so far, because even if there was monetization of it, it would be mostly to finance the NGO parts that I would really like to grow, to create, you know. Like, I'm a software engineer. I can make my money on my own. Coding for a company is not an issue. It's just I want this to have the most solid foundation it can be and very authentic, because I think when you get too hasty and think about, especially in an environment where people like grow so fast, you have those YouTubers, you have those streamers that grow so fast and make so much money. So anybody that start with podcasts and want to do something thinks about the day they're going to hit big. And I think it can detract you from your message. So I'm trying to not even bother myself with that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable. And there are a lot of people that share that sentiment, using it as a platform, right, to reach people and to share your message. And that can be enough. It gets to be enough for people. I 100% agree with you. So that's great to hear from you and understand your why behind Stairway to Redemption podcast. You mentioned that you are a part of the Black Podcast Association. What's been your experience with that so far?
So far, it's been good. Thanks to I met you, I met Corey, the CEO of it. Heard about you doing this initiative for Black History Month with 28 Black podcasters. So far, I'm still on the rise, on the hill, the first hill of that rising curve when it comes to learning the tools for me, because it can be overwhelming and I don't necessarily have the time to see what's the difference between the newsletter, like the different meetings, and a little bit overwhelmed. But I'm sticking it with it. Thank God I have Raphael, who's like a mutual friend of ours who introduced me to the association, who's being a great mentor, who doesn't hesitate messaging me, hey, did you see this? For example, message me about your initiative. And there was no doubt that I would have missed it if I didn't check on the site, but I didn't need to. Raphael hit me up. He said, hey, man, I think you'll be perfect for this. What do you think?
Yeah. Nice. All right, man. That's great to hear the relationships that you have and that are there. They're waiting on you when you're ready to begin to engage and attend things. We'll be right there waiting on you and ready to support you in any way that we can. But I'm glad that you're a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So is there anything else that you want to share with the folks that are listening and watching?
Yes, I would like to take this moment to talk about the effect of addiction in community of colors and minorities. When I was inpatient in a facility, I noticed that everybody drinks. Most people use drugs. I don't want to say everybody, but if you take the demographic of people who drink and use drugs, they're not proportional to the demographic of the people inpatient. So where all those people who suffer. It's mostly, we see our Black brothers who are like in there, but even us, man, we're the most diverse group. We are the largest minority, but you don't see Asian people, the Asian community in the rooms. You don't see the Indian community in the rooms, like the Hispanic barely. You're like, those people are drinking and suffering somewhere too. Even when it comes to recovery, you don't see them either. I understand, like, we are only targeted. I remember the therapist made me cry about, hey man, you're foreign, you're a Black man in America, right? Do you want to add drug addict as a label to all that? And that's all she said. I started crying, but it helped because we are people too, and we are not going to bury our hand in the sand thinking that, oh man, I don't want to come in the room because I will be labeled as such. No, man. I think there's an approach where it doesn't matter. From the moment where you know what yourself you're about, those labels, you should not worry about them. They sting a little bit, but once I read a lot about Stoicism lately, and Stoicism is the school of thought that are things, the dichotomy between two things, the things that are in your control and the things that are not. Adversity is going to come and hit you. It's like the wave at the beach. It's going to come and hit you. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can always decide how you're going to react to it. And that's what you are in control of. And out there, people are going to label you because you fell into addiction and stuff. They will. Be ready for it. But you can always decide how to react and how to define yourself. So people in minority communities who are like ashamed of the room or because they don't think they'll be represented, still show up into recovery, whatever it is, smart program, AA, like outpatient, inpatient. Find a way to gravitate, to find your way out of that hole because you deserve it. That's it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And what I'm hearing you say is that, and I use another term, I use the global majority because we are the global majority when it comes to Black people. And we've been labeled as minority for reasons, but it's not true. So with that said, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a stigma inside of our different communities, whether it's immigrant or Black American, Indian, what have you, Asian, but in people of color communities and familial stigmas that keep us from seeking out help that we deserve, we need. And it is important because each of us are individuals, right? So that community doesn't get saved. Community can be saved. It's a trickle-down effect. But the point is that it's you requires the saving and the support. And with that said, you're the one that's got to go out and get it for yourself. So love that you shared that, Benny. And it is important. It runs the gamut around a lot of things that our communities create stigma around. Unpopular thoughts, unpopular beliefs. We tend to not want to speak up and admit But again, it's about our own salvation, our own ability to face ourselves and be willing to go there for ourselves. I appreciate that, man.
Thank you. Yeah, because this thing doesn't discriminate, man. Addiction touch. It doesn't care about where you're from or like what you've been through. The thing I thought was like, oh, because I come from like a country ravaged by civil war for 2, 3, 5 years. I was like, there's no way this thing's gonna take me down. And I was stupid to think that I was too strong or to I've seen worse. Like how the hell addiction's gonna take me? Like
yeah.
But I was wrong. So this thing doesn't discriminate. You think you're strong mentally, creeps on you in your worst when you have the lowest self-esteem and it sticks with you. Like it doesn't care what you went through.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and to that point, you saying that and that can't touch me, it actually makes you more susceptible because while you are actively in self-destruction mode, but also actively telling you that it's not possible, it's actually happening at the same time.
Yeah, you are the one falling faster than anyone else because you feel like you're almighty, you know.
Yeah, I think it's important. And there are a lot of people inside of even our podcast community, this podcast network, the conferences. We are people that happen to podcast, but we're people first. And all of us have different backgrounds and stories. And so I know that there are going to be people that have a vested interest in this topic itself and also will get a lot out of it and be inspired. So I appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, thank you very much, Talib. And I appreciate also what you're doing, going around finding 28 people, man. Good thing it wasn't a leap year. You had to find 29.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I opened my mouth and here we are. So I'm appreciating it. And just like you with your podcast, the opportunity to connect with people like yourself, whereas I wouldn't have known much of your story. We met in passing, we talked a bit, but that could have been the end of it. And that's it. So the opportunity to really learn a lot more about you and let you know about me and the things that I think about and stuff like that. I think that is where we win as a community and as a people. At the end of the day, it's the people that matter.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So I'm going to close this out and I'm going to ask you to just hang out with me. Before I do that, can you please tell people where they can find the podcast and if there's any social media or website that you want to share?
Yeah. So you can find the podcast as www.stairwaytoredemption, like a staircase, Stairway to Redemption. We're also on TikTok at Stairway to Redemption, all one word, on Instagram at Stairway to Redemption. Yeah, and we're on Spotify, Apple News, Google, Apple Podcasts, Amazon One, Amazon Podcast, I believe. Yeah, we on all major platforms. Just look for Stairway to Redemption. It's like a purple and yellow staircase logo, and hopefully you like it.
All right, and all that information will be in the description. So I want to give a big thanks to our Afros in Audio and Black podcast community for supporting our commitment for community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcast Association, the link will be in the description below. And if you want to join us at the 5th annual Afros in Audio Podcast Festival, visit bit.ly/AFAU FAQ. Also in the description. Follow us on all social media channels at Afros in Audio. Thanks again, Benny, for being a part of Afros in Audio's first Black History Month interview series. I appreciate it.
Thank you.